The following is rated S for spoilers.
There's a Firefly base camp somewhere out west with doctors. They're working on a cure.
Mm-hmm. I've heard this before.
And whatever happened to me is
the key to finding the vaccine. That's what this is.
Hello and welcome to the Popcorn Hangover. My name is Alex.
My name is Graham.
And today we are going to be discussing HBO's The Last of Us, created by Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, starring Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey, releasing on January 15th of 2023. Graham, how are you doing this week?
Dude, I'm doing good.
Yeah?
I'm doing good. Yeah. Spent the week actually catching up on this mostly.
Yeah?
Dude, like I said, with the weekly drops, I fall behind pretty quick.
Sure.
So, was actually able to get through it all today, actually.
Nice.
Well, ended it today, and dude, I'm excited about this one.
Yes, I love this game. I was listening to a podcast that I'll reference a lot later on, but he said that The Last of Us was like his Star Wars, and that was like his story awakening. And I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, like I
definitely see what he's saying.
Yeah.
Like, The Last of Us game is so good. I play it like 2 or 3 times a year because I'm obsessed with it, and I was so excited for the show and also scared for the show. And let me say, all of my expectations were more than exceeded.
Yeah.
We are going to talk about the show as a whole, but if you want to hear our thoughts on individual episodes, check out our TikTok at the Popcorn Hangover, where we did weekly instant reactions to all of the episodes. I think I may have missed one, but
so you were on top of it. For the most part.
I stay up until the crack of dawn to watch all of these, so it's might as well.
Yeah.
Graham, let's just jump into it.
All right.
You watched all this just now?
Yeah, pretty recent. Yeah, between yesterday and today.
So what are your thoughts on this?
Thoughts overall? I really liked it. I've known about the characters, known about the story over the years. I never actually played the game like all the way through, so really much at all. And so I didn't know what to expect. So a lot of the little jump scares and the twists and turns, they were fresh. Like, it was brand new to me. But dude, it was so good. It was the way it was shot, the way it was put together. A lot of the flashbacks. I get really worried with some stories when they do a lot of flashbacks and jumps back and forth, and having certain episodes just a designated episode to this, and it's not really pertaining too much to the whole story. Some people get lost in all that, but I really enjoyed this. I was really scared it was going to be just another Walking Dead kind of a thing, and people are going to be like, we already had 15 seasons of that. What's this? Not too much care, but no, a lot of people, including myself, really liked this.
Yeah.
So.
Speaking about people who liking this, I went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Like I said at the end of last week's episode, I've been just slowly gathering information and prepping for this episode months before the show even premiered. I've been keeping track of an interesting stat of people who watched the show. And let me tell you, this show attracted fans like it was a bunch of cordyceps. So first episode on Sunday, which if you look at all the time zones and things, that basically leaves 6 hours. So in a 6-hour period, 4.7 million people watched the first episode for a total of 223 million minutes watched.
That's literally insane.
Just 6 hours. And then it kept growing. So after 2 days, 10 million people had watched it. 7 days, 18 million people had watched it. And by 12 days in, so 2 episodes out, 22 million people had watched the first episode.
Crap.
And also, if you look at the live viewership numbers, this is from Forbes, so I don't know how accurate it is, but I don't know. They seem like a reputable site.
Yeah.
If you look at live viewing numbers, which is, I'm assuming just people who watched it on HBO, on TV, the first episode had about 0.6 million live viewers.
Wow.
Just by episode 7, so a couple months later, it had almost double that with 1.1 million viewers.
Shoot.
So, this show it kept getting, it wasn't just everyone's going to watch the first episode and die off like most shows do. It just kept growing and growing and growing because it just kept getting better and better.
I
know.
expected there to be like an episode halfway through, like just seeing things on Twitter and stuff, just being like, where people are like, that was it. And like you just watch things slowly die, and it never did.
No.
No.
I think in one of my TikToks, they even said, like, I don't know if this is bad, but every episode is my new favorite episode
Yeah.
because they're all just so good. And I think the last episode might be my least favorite of this season. Not to say it was a bad episode. I think it says more about the show as a whole, but if one has to be last, it might be the last episode for me.
That's interesting.
Okay, you would disagree.
Not necessarily. For me, like, I thought that they were all like relatively equal. I don't think I had one specifically like stand out, because every episode, I mean, ideally was like travel, backstory, new character, this character. Like it, like rarely did it have like a couple episodes that were like strung together. I thought I think it's episode 8 with like the little cannibalistic group. That was intense. Just that whole interaction.
That,
the people
I think, was
behind
my
it,
favorite episode.
Yeah, I was gonna say if one stood out most, that's what I would mark down. Otherwise, like they were all like, nothing was like mediocre. It was just like everything was better than that. I don't think anything like surpassed like episode 8 though, in my opinion. So I wouldn't have like a worst episode.
I made a really big mistake with episode 8 because I knew what was coming. I was very well what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I still decided to make myself like a hamburger for dinner, and I was eating that while watching the episode. And so I'm just sitting here, chowing down on my food, and then they're like, "Hey, what's that?" And he goes, "It's deer meat."
It's venison. No, it's not.
I went. I just I was like halfway through a bite, and I just put it down on the table and said, "Okay."
That's tough.
I think I'm full now.
Yeah, nothing bothered me much until she was trying to get out of the cage and she spotted the ear, and I was like, "Oh gosh!" And it hit me too, because at first I was like, the one girl like mentioned, she's like, "Oh, when are we gonna bury my dad?" And he's like, "We'll do it in the spring. Don't worry about it." And I was like, "Yeah, like that makes sense, complete sense, understandable." And I saw the ear, and I was like, "Oh, homie's." He didn't make it to the ground. He's gone already.
I think that's the brilliance of this show, is because we have two totally different perspectives going into it. And for me, it was still incredibly entertaining and almost shocking, even though I knew it was coming. Seeing stuff like that we didn't get anything from the perspective of like the preacher dude and all the stuff going on in this town. That wasn't a thing in the game, because the game is about Joel and a little bit of Ellie.
Right.
And so there were still little things like that and little details and plot points that still kept the show very, very interesting and engaging for me, who already kind of knew what was going on. It was kind of like expanding the world for me, as opposed to it just being really great storytelling
that you've already been through. Yeah.
For you. Yeah.
Which that's what I was, because going into this, I expected it to be a little more, not like darker in a sense, but like more of the horror aspect. Like there were some scenes that were like just ominous, like eerie, and I was like a little uncomfy watching. But most of the time, it just really felt like it was so strongly like story driven. Like it was just, I just wanted more. Every single episode ended, I was like, okay, next one. Which for me, I was lucky they were basically all out up until Sunday for the 9th one. But yeah, I was. I liked that it wasn't as dark as I thought it would be, but is that about equal to the game, or is the game have a little more with it? The game
definitely has some moments, and it kind of, so like there's different modes you can play, and so like just on the typical game, there's a listen mode, so like Joel can like listen really closely, and you can like see through walls and stuff because sound's a big aspect. But if you play on like the more difficult modes, that's turned off, and so basically like I can't play it without headphones. You have to put headphones on, and you just have to listen, and you hear these clicks coming from all around you, and it's completely dark. And so you'll just jump around a corner, and a clicker will pop out and attack you, and your soul leaves your body for a second, because it's just it's out of nowhere.
That all the way.
It's not that it's not that scary, but like when you get really invested into it, which just with the story itself, like it's hard not to be. Oh yeah, that's what makes you scared.
And I mean, watching these episodes, I was like locked in. Nothing like outside. Like, and of course, we turn off the lights, nice and dark. You're just focused on the TV, and so there were some things, jump out. It got me, but I can understand being like just totally immersed in that game.
No, yeah, like my apartment has awful soundproofing, and so like at night, like my neighbor and I are both watching TV, like it's kind of a battle to see who's going to get their TV the loudest. And like, so I could hear her watching TV above me, but 5 minutes in, I forgot that anything else was happening because I was so like invested in what was going on. Like it really just immediately grabs your attention and keeps it no matter what the theme of the episode is that day or what's going on. Like, you were constantly fully engaged and immersed in the episode.
Yeah, it was great, dude.
I think the biggest thing that made the show a success, there's lots of things, but I think one of the bigger things is the acting in the game.
In the game, in the show?
In the show.
Okay.
I'm going to say that interchangeably because it's one and the same to me.
Yeah. I did. One thing I want to say really quick. I saw on Twitter, almost every voice actor or like mocap actor, did they hold an actual role in the show? Or like the majority of them?
Big ones. So I was going to do that next, but we can talk about that now. Since you brought it up. So Marlene, that's the same actress who plays her in the game.
Oh, dope. Same voice, same
everything.
Is it Perry that was Joel?
No.
Oh, I thought I had that right.
Joel was played by Troy Baker in the game. And Troy Baker was like kind of in charge of like all like the after show stuff. Looks nothing like Joel, sounds nothing like Joel. And he played like the right hand man guy to the preacher in episode 8.
James?
James, yes.
Man.
Yeah, so that was the original Joel. He got cleaved
real quick
in half. And then Ashley Johnson plays Ellie in the game, and she played Ellie's mom in episode 9.
That's
which
sick.
makes a lot of sense. But I will say it did bug me a little bit because Ashley Johnson does sound exactly like Ellie. She didn't do any like changes to her voice.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my God, it's Ellie. It's Ellie. Look, it's Ellie. Like that's all I could think of. But I'm like, it kind of took me out of the very intense trying to have a baby while being attacked by an infected
that threw me for a loop. That was a rough one.
I should have felt really intense, but I was distracted because I was like, oh my God, it's Ellie. That's her. So those are like the big ones. I'm sure that others had roles.
The one I saw today was the nurses and the last, and like when he takes her out of the surgery room, the 2 nurses he tells to turn around. One of those was played by the girl that plays Abby in The Last of Us 2.
Interesting.
Yep. So I was like, I just didn't know how much more on top of that was because I like heard the guy that played Joel's was in it at some point. I didn't know who he was. But no, which I think is really cool. Like, I don't know if they really had to try too hard for that or if they were like, hey, like, let us in. Like,
no, I don't help think
us out.
So. Because, I mean, you also have Neil Druckmann, who was the writer and director for the game coming back and having a very
relationship
major role
with them
with the show. And I think, that's another thing we'll talk about next segment. But yeah, I think overall, like, acting was brilliant, even from returning actors. But going into the show, when they announced that Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey were going to be our 2 stars,
I was sold, bro.
I was not.
No?
No. I had faith in Pedro Pascal because I knew he has range. He's played a similar role with The Mandalorian.
Right.
But I think a lot of it has to do with Joel is not a Hispanic guy, to be honest. Yeah. He's like a very stereotypical, like gruffy, like white man's man, like Texan kind of dude.
Just contractor, yeah.
But Pedro Pascal just brought so much more depth, and he killed everything that Joel was in the game, but then also brought even more emotion and depth to the character. And I think what he did was fantastic, and I can't imagine anyone else playing the live action version of Joel. Bella Ramsey, I did not like as Ellie. For the first several episodes, I was just like, this isn't like she's trying, but this is not Ellie. And for context, Ellie is one of my favorite characters in any medium of all time.
Okay.
And so that was one that I was like, you're gonna have to really sell me on this because I have a very particular idea of who Ellie is. And after a few episodes, I forget which one it was, but I was like, okay, it works. This is Ellie. I see it. And just when we got to 7 and 8, which are mostly just her episodes, I was nervous
intense.
I was nervous with part 2 being announced because that is an Ellie-driven game and an Ellie-driven story, and so I was really worried about like I don't know if Pedro Pascal can carry a show, no problem, but can she carry it? And I think those 2 episodes in particular proved that Bella Ramsey 100% can carry the rest of the show.
Yeah.
However far they end up taking it.
I hope to see a lot. I hope to see
Yeah.
a lot more.
The
Game wise, it's just 1 and 2, right?
as of now, two ends very. It's a very good conclusion, but it's
Cliffhanger,
also
It just leaves more room to expand if they wanted to.
It ends exactly like this, where this is the end to the story. If there was never a part 2, that's
It is
fine.
what it is,
Yeah, it's the end of the story, but also there's lots of open-endedness to continue.
Okay.
And part 2 ends the same way. There is a very defined ending to that story, but if they wanted to continue it, they probably could.
Mm-hmm.
If that would be with Ellie, I don't know. That's a whole other speculation and topic for another day. Tune in a couple years when we talk about Last of Us season 2. And yeah, then maybe we'll have some more answers for you. But yeah, I thought they absolutely killed it. Both of them did. Yeah, Bella Ramsey took a little bit for me to get used to and to really fall in love with as Ellie. But I can't imagine anyone else taking on that role and doing such a good job.
Yeah. I saw a few clips just on like Twitter and like Reddit and stuff of like side by sides. And like after like, because I don't even think I watched the first episode when it dropped. I think it was like a week or two out when I watched 1 and 2 initially. And so I'd seen a few things from the game and I was like, yeah, it's like, it looks really, I mean, shoot, just from the first episode, it was like frame by frame. Like I saw that comparison before I watched the first episode and that got me really excited. And I know she was in Game of Thrones. I think I never saw Game of Thrones, but I'm assuming if they can pull anyone from there that held a role.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I didn't know that either until like just the other day. I literally saw like, yeah, he had a role. That's crazy. I only saw him in like Mando was like the first thing I saw him in, but that's crazy. Yeah, no, I thought they both killed it. I love Pedro Pascal. So does everyone. Right now he's America's.
It's hard not to.
Yeah, he really. Yeah.
Sounds like Spanish to me. Oh my gosh. I can't stop saying that just over and over and over again. Anyway, yeah, do you have any final thoughts on The Last of Us? Because I feel like the conversation just is headed straight towards segment 2. We
can just jump into it. So no, season 1 was one for the books. This is one of the best adaptations I think I've seen. Just from, like I said, seeing side by sides and clips, they killed it. I have the game. I own the game. I'm about to fire it up. And
I think you need to play through it. It's a different experience. We'll talk about that. Yeah, I don't even say this is best adaptation. I think it's just one of the best shows, period, of all time. I may be a little biased in that, but I really liked it. Next segment, we're going to talk about though, like what does make this such a good adaptation and the things and the care that was taken into crafting it that made it so brilliant. So stay tuned for more on that. So, Graham, you think that The Last of Us would you say it's a perfect adaptation?
I do. I would say that.
Not having actually played the game.
I said that first segment, and then I was like, well, I don't have much to back that off of. But what I've seen, like I mentioned, like I saw so many clips from the game that were like side by sides, frame by frames, like almost perfect, identical recreations of the game to the show. And even just from that, like I feel like I've played the game. Like I feel like I feel like I've seen enough to like contest to that. Obviously, I do. I want to play the game. I need to play the game, and I'm very excited to. But from what I've seen, yeah, I feel like almost anyone, even though someone that has played the game, I feel like can also agree.
No, I would have been a very annoying person to watch this show with, because every few minutes, like, oh my god, they did the thing, and there's the reference to that thing, and like she's wearing the shirt, and like just everything. I was losing my mind over because it was. I would say it was a pretty. I wouldn't say it's a perfect adaptation, but it was pretty dang close, and I think it might be the best adaptation of anything that we've ever seen before.
Okay,
we're getting ahead of ourselves. We should be asking that question at the end and coming to that conclusion at the end. We shouldn't write for The Last of Us because we're awful at telling stories. So here's the thing that I find interesting about the more and more leading into the show. One of the things that scared me was the amount of people who, when asked, "Have you played the game?" would answer, "No, I heard of it and I never actually played it." Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey being the two biggest of those. Neither of them knew anything about the game really going into it.
Yikes.
Which was terrifying for me because I said, how are they going to do it?
Yeah. Because normally a lot of actors will like do some research or like plan for an audition or role ahead. So
yeah. And it sounds like they're like really big scenes and moments. They did go back and watch cut scenes and things like that. But when you have Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, Craig Mazin was really big on, we need to honor the game. He was a big fan of the game. And so that really helped.
What a guy.
Yeah. Yes, but there's a podcast I'll link to in the show notes. It's an editing podcast. It's one of my favorite podcasts of all time. But even if you don't like editing, this is a really great podcast to listen to because they talk with some of the editors about how they approach some different things. Like one of the head editor had never even heard of The Last of Us, knew nothing about it, but he was close with Craig Mazin and they worked together. But he told one of his assistants, hey, I'm working on this show called The Last of Us. And she lost her mind. And even in the podcast, she's wearing a green plaid shirt, exactly like Joel's. It was really interesting seeing how people who had never seen the game and knew nothing about it, and the people who knew everything about it were able to come together and create something that was both really, really fresh, but also honored everything that the game was and all it was trying to say and convey. But like this new kind of, these fresh eyes basically were able to come in and completely change some things and make it totally new and totally fresh.
I don't think it ever hurts to ever have someone out of the box. Like, but in this case though, I think having those people who like did have like not know what to expect, but really kind of had like a passion and vision of what they wanted to bring was really what brought this to life. Like one thing I keep not comparing to, but bringing up in my head is like with like The Walking Dead. Like for example, you were a big fan. You are a big fan relatively. Like you read comics
of The Walking Dead.
Yeah. Watched the show.
I read the comics up until Andrea died, and I was so sad about it that I couldn't continue. I like the comics. The show is okay. I haven't seen that since. I think I was like my freshman year of high school.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
I couldn't tell you a single thing about it.
But like I just didn't know, like from what I know, like I never read the comics, never knew much about The Walking Dead. I watched the show and like got into it, but it like I don't know what it exactly would have been missing, but compared to like this, it's not the same. And obviously it's a different style, I guess, because that is zombies. These are not zombies, as that's been very well made aware of. But like, I just really like what I'm trying to like put through, what I'm thinking like is with like the content of like, wow, I just went totally blank. Like with what you're drawing from like the original content or like source material of like game to show, like it really matters.
Yeah.
And like obviously with fresh eyes, like it's nice. But again, like basically everything you just said before I started talking is, I agree with. I really just lost my train of thought there.
All right. I mean, that works. You said I was right. So that's all I care about. Yeah. No, so I forget the editor's name, but the head editor, he had never played the game before, and he was very big on like, he's like, I kind of don't want to watch any of the cutscenes because I don't want that to determine all of my decisions. And Craig Mazin was like, yes, absolutely, like you want to make this different.
Yeah.
But for the very final scene, it's a massive scene. It's completely, I mean, that's. For a lot of people, like, it was just The Last of Us. That was the end of the game, and you're like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, I don't know how to feel about like this relationship that's been developing, and like this is how like we're ending. Like, it was really big.
Talking about like right at the edge of the mountains,
the literal
over
the end
town.
Where she says, "Tell me it's all true." And
swear to me, and he's like, "Yeah."
He says, "I swear." Craig Mazin was like, "Hey, like, I think you should watch this just because this is huge. Everyone's gonna know this."
Yeah.
And the editor's like, yeah, okay. And like 5 minutes later, said, no, I sorry, I can't do it. He's like, I have to just let me cut it, and then we can go back, we can watch it. If we need to make changes, we'll make them. And Craig Mazin said, sounds great. So he cuts the scene, gets it how he likes it, and then he and his assistant, Craig Mazin, are sitting there watching the two, both versions side by side, like you're seeing on TikTok and everything. And the assistant editor went, oh my God, it's the same, it's the same, it's the same. And like literally, all of the cuts and angles and things were almost the exact same. Bro. And a lot of that comes down to just knowing how to edit and being a good editor.
Right.
A lot of that comes down to it was shot to look like the cut scene. And so he only has so many resources to work with.
Right.
But also that just comes down to the storytelling being so brilliant for The Last of Us, and like keeping this a very similar mindset. One of the big things that they did with the show, they did with the game, and they really want to emphasize in the show, is negative space, meaning no dialogue. And so there's these really big scenes where the characters will be going back and forth, and then the dialogue will stop and we'll just rest on their faces while you're seeing like the emotion on the actors' faces as they're processing what was just said, what they're going to say next. And that evokes even more emotion in you.
Right.
And so like there was all this really brilliant storytelling in The Last of Us. And I think that's what makes The Last of Us one of the best games of all time. Gameplay wise, it's amazing, but it's the story that puts it on a whole other level.
Okay.
Call of Duty has good gameplay, but there is no story, which makes it it can make it dull at times. And so because you have great story, that's what elevates The Last of Us, the game. And one thing that a lot of adaptations will do, and one of the things that The Last of Us did not do, was they didn't change the story because they could. Right. They said, this works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's just keep the exact same mindset and everything going into this, because
you can't fail.
That's what made the game work so well.
Yeah.
And now we're putting it in a medium that is designed for those cutscenes. And like the cutscenes are basically mini versions of TV shows. And so like, let's just import those into the actual show. And yes, make some changes and make it work better for a TV audience. But like, I was so scared they were just going to change so many things senselessly. But the game worked. And even when you just push it over onto a script and you film it with a camera, it still works the exact same way. Yeah. For the most part.
Okay. I have a question then. So with the talked about Last of Us 2 being season 2, do you think they'll change a lot, or do you think they'll keep it relatively the same?
Boy, I hope they change a lot.
Do you? Do you? Okay.
The Last of Us,
we're not talking about The Last of Us 2, but from what you've...
Sure. I mean, you open Pandora's box because I'm passionate about this.
What? No. What?
The Last of Us 2 is very, very divisive among fans. And honestly, it comes there. Feel like The Last of Us 2 comes down to mostly two different kinds of people: people who love the story, people who love gameplay, and then all at a third person, people who are willing to adapt and kind of move on. The gameplay in The Last of Us 2, I mean, The Last of Us is almost perfect gameplay across the board, and The Last of Us 2 somehow made it better. Like, physically playing the game is so cool, and it's incredible because you're playing as Ellie, so she's more versatile, and so she can do a few more things, and like, Last of Us 2 gameplay, top tier. But when it comes to story, they made some decisions that I really did not like. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but just really stupid decisions. You play the first half of the game as Ellie, and then it cuts off and you go back in time, and then you play more of the game as like the villain of the story. And it's supposed to you're supposed to like the villain, and then the villain and Ellie fight, but you're playing as the villain to fight Ellie. And then I stood there for 5 minutes like, I don't want to kill Ellie. Can Ellie kill me, and then I can just keep playing as Ellie? Because I like Ellie. I don't care about Abby. Just really questionable story decisions. And so I hope at the bare minimum, because the game is mostly split up into day 1, day 2, day 3, and then you go back in time and start again at day 1 from different perspective. So I hope at the bare minimum, when they adapt it, they have all of the days combined. So we're seeing day 1 from both perspectives, and we see day 2 from both perspectives, and it's not split into multiple episodes.
I could see them splitting it into multiple episodes. Like, say you do like day 1 Ellie, day 1 Abby, or do 1, 2, 3.
That might work.
Throw it back 3 weeks from now, restart it from her point of view. 1, 2, 3.
I think I just think that's a really bad decision. Not a fan.
Yeah,
it was really stupid. I hope they put it, even if it was 2 episodes for day 1, 1 for each perspective. I think that could work better. Just the way the game approached it was not was not very good. So I hope they make a lot more changes for part 2.
Yeah.
In general, I'm very nervous for season 2. Also because I know that if it's as successful as this, they're going to make a season 3.
Yeah.
And
Well,
at
that's
that
what I was gonna
point,
say.
they're going into uncharted territory.
Can they really branch so far off of that?
Well, and in my head, I thought that season 2 was going to take place in between The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2, because there is a massive time jump. And so in my head, that's what they were just going to show more stories in Jackson as these two navigate their relationship. And that was going to be that. But it's not. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Okay, cool.
I guess.
I mean, I'm excited. Like I said, if they can just keep the amazing content coming, I don't think it's going to affect anyone. I don't think anyone's going to be too up or down against it. Like I said, this first season was amazing. I'm excited for the second season. Like I said, I might just do what I did here where I just don't play the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just go in blind.
Maybe.
I think that might, I don't know. Just
We'll see
from
if you
hearing
can
like
do that.
story side. Well, here's the thing. I say if I play the first one, I'm going to literally just download the second one. So I don't know. I'll see if I can make it that far.
Yeah. But The Last of Us show did make some changes from the game.
Okay.
Some of them were pretty big. Some of them were interesting and I was a little scared about. But for example, Infected. In the game, there are the infections was spread through the air. And so from a gameplay mechanic, it worked really well because you would walk into a space and then you would see spores is what they were. You'd see little spores and things in the air. And so you would put on your mask and then that's how you kind of knew you were entering into an infected area kind of zone. That's a really great gameplay mechanic. But if you look at it logically, like you kind of do with the show,
Yeah, if it's like slapping masks on and off. Or,
well, you would have to slap mask on and off, but also if it's an airborne infection, it's not going to, if one room in a building has spores in it like the game, it's not going to be contained to one room because it's air. It's going to go everywhere.
Right.
So the entire world will be infected in a matter of days. Didn't make any sense. And I was like, okay, so what are they going to do instead? Because spores kind of make sense. And it's like, and they kept it in the very same kind of realm with fungus and everything, but instead they made it cordyceps and they kind of made it a hive mind sort of thing. And I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was a super cool change, and I thought it worked really well. It made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it almost made it more terrifying. Just this, I mean, even just visually.
Yeah.
A zombie doesn't just go and bite you. It literally, like, a fungus jumps out of it and tries to go inside you.
That was disgusting. That was disgusting. When that thing just came after Tess, it was just like, there should have been some warning. There should have been some... That would just felt on a whole different level. But yeah.
It was gross.
Yeah.
One change that the show did make, and I understand why they made it, I didn't love though, was a lack of infected.
I was gonna say I was kind of surprised in the later episode. I feel like episode 1 and 2, obviously it's like outbreaks kind of happening, like people are running, like that's when the mode of travel starts. So like they're really warned about it, and you hear it and see it a lot. But after that, I mean, there were what? I mean, besides like. Oh, I don't know. What's it, episode 5 or 6 with like everyone comes underground in Kansas?
Episode 5, yeah.
That was insane.
But
other than that, there was like no other real infected fights or any.
Yeah, I kind of understand it. And as the game progresses, you do get infected become less and less of a main plot point as opposed to
Like
you're traversing this area. Okay, you're going to go into an infected area to make the game more interesting.
Okay.
So it is very much a gameplay mechanic, and I think that was an interesting thing that they navigated in the show was how to incorporate gameplay the story elements of the gameplay with what was going on in the show. One of my favorite moments from the game is a moment where Joel and Ellie like first really connect. In the show or in the game, Ellie's constantly like, "Hey," even in the show, she's like, "Can I have a gun? Can I have a gun?" He's like, "No, you can't have a gun." And then she saves him like she does in the show. And in the game, Joel kind of is still like, "No, you're not having a gun." But then shortly after is like, "Okay, I need your help." Hands her a gun and says, "You're going to shoot these people if I get in trouble." And it's a really cool mission, and it's solely a gameplay mechanic. And so I was worried they were going to skip out on it, but instead they kept all of the same content, but instead of him just being like, hey, if I get in trouble, use this, he said, let me show you how to use this. And so it was a massive change from the game, but it still kept the core of what was going on. It was a lot of the same kind of dialogue, but they took the gameplay mechanic out of it and they just made it a more cinematic and a more personal connection between the two.
That's really dope.
Yeah, I almost preferred it the way they did it in the show, to be honest. So they made lots of changes like that. Another gameplay change. I think one of my favorite missions of all time is when you're going down the street and a sniper's trying to attack you, and you got to like sneak around to get the sniper, and then infected come, and you got to shoot all the infected, like as Joel, like in the house. And that's a really cool gameplay thing that I didn't think they were going to do, but the show found a way to incorporate that so perfectly. And it was so awesome, just infected everywhere, and Joel just going at it, trying to, keep infected off of Ellie and everything. So the way they were able to balance the gameplay and the and just the visual storytelling was really, really good.
I'm curious, how old is Joel in the games?
He's in his 50s, I want to say. Okay. Maybe 60.
Okay.
That's another thing.
I know they don't really point out his exact age, but doesn't he turn like 35 or something, like with the birthday cake? Or you're supposed to get the cake, and then it like flashes like 20 years later. And so you can kind of add it up. I figured like late 50s, 60s, but homie was trucking like he was in his early 20s. Man was just blazing through people and infected and
to an extent.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course he took some L's, but
and that's something I do want to I thought was really, really great about what was going on with the show and how they were adapting it was in the game, Joel is basically superhuman. Dude can hear through walls. He can carry like 16 guns and thousands of rounds of ammo. He can run constantly. He gets shot and he just wraps a bandage around his arm and he's good to go. Like, dude's basically superhuman, and you kind of have. It's a video game, so you kind of have to be able to play the game. But I like that they made him more realistic. Example, having hearing loss. When you're shooting guns like that, you're obviously going to have hearing loss. Another thing was when he stands up, it's a small detail, and I probably wouldn't have noticed it if I didn't read this from Craig Mazin, but like when he has bad knees, and so when he stands up, like it hurts to stand up because his knees are bad, and things like that. And so, but one thing that they skipped out from the game, there's a line from Tommy. They're being attacked by raiders, and he says, "All right, Joel, go do your thing." And Tommy's really upset about like Joel turning them into killers and everything. He says, "All right, Joel, go do your thing," and then you go and you ruthlessly murder all of these raiders who have Ellie and Martha or whatever Tommy's wife's name is hostage, and like he goes ham, and then you see it again in the few episodes later when he's interrogating the townspeople. And
gosh,
that I didn't think we would get that scene. I was like, that might be a little too brutal for like what they're doing here, but it was Joel snapped, and I loved it. That was such a cool scene.
Gosh, but see, that's what I'm talking about. It's like he just went through being stabbed, he slept for a few days.
All right,
but then he gets up, he does that, saves Ellie, carries her out of there. They're gone. They're hiking out, hikes for several days, gets put down pretty quick by the fireflies, and then he's like in the hospital room. And
there's a lot more time. You got to realize
between all of
whenever they leave the town, it's winter. When they get to Seattle,
it's like spring,
or it's not Seattle. That's the second game.
Salt Lake.
When they get to Oklahoma,
Utah,
wherever it is they went to. It's springtime. So there's a big.
That's true. But still, even like, but I was like thinking like when he got like knocked down, concussed by the grenade, absolutely gone. He's disoriented. And then he gets knocked out, and then he gets hit in the stomach a few times. Homie's like getting beat around. And he just goes through and murks an entire hospital of like a literal.
Yeah, but I think that's what happens whenever your daughter is going to die. I mean,
it didn't happen the first time. No, don't worry. No,
all right.
That might be too much, but
too soon.
No, that's true. He's been through a little more now. But I was just like he's definitely not in peak condition to be doing through all that. So I was wondering, like,
I mean, maybe not peak condition, but I think because of what happened to his daughter, what happened to Sarah, he snapped.
He just had the willpower to go.
And so
to get
in
through it
that
all.
20-year time span, he became an absolute monster.
That is true.
And was just living life ready to die. And then he meets Ellie. Ellie changes things. When he finds out he's going to lose Ellie, anytime that comes back out, and it doesn't matter what he physically can or can't do. He's going to absolutely do whatever it takes to not lose his daughter again.
Man.
Which is, it's so great.
It
So
really
great.
was. It really was.
It's so good all across the board. Another thing the show did that was interesting was the shifting perspectives. In the game, you're playing as Joel, and so you see everything from Joel's perspective, unless he is incapacitated, in which case you're Ellie for that short period of time. But rest of the game, you play as Joel, and that's fine, and that's really interesting.
Right.
But in the show, they're allowed to shift perspectives, and so we're able to see more stories of these different people that they're traveling with or like they're going up against. We're also able to see more of Ellie's perspective. I think a really big moment was, Ellie comforting Sam, and then whenever what's his name kills himself because of it, Henry, and he kills himself. Like in the game, we see that from Joel's perspective and his reaction to Henry killing himself, and it cuts to black. But instead, in the show, Henry puts the gun to his head. We cut to Ellie. Gunshot goes off, and we stay on Ellie in her reaction to, I completely screwed up. I should have said something sooner. We could have gotten this worked out. But I tried to save him. Now they're both dead, and that creates a whole new level of emotion and a whole new level of character for what's going on in that moment, as opposed to just Joel saying no, cut to black, moving on in the next part. So that shifting perspective was really great. I'm also going to open up a little controversy like I did on TikTok.
Okay.
Because there was one chance that I thought I just didn't understand it. And that was episode 3.
Okay.
Do you have any particular thoughts on episode 3?
Honestly, no. Okay. I mean, I love Nick Offerman. So I was hoping, when I heard he was going to be Bill, I was hoping there would be more of him.
It was perfect casting.
But honestly, I like the episode. I really didn't have much of anything wrong with it.
Here's my thing.
Okay.
That was one of the greatest short films I have ever seen. It was.
I say it was all self-contained, besides like part of the beginning.
All around, it just didn't belong in this season of this show. If they wanted to do a second season that explored other people's stories, like I thought they were, I could understand having a more like anthology kind of setting. And I understand why they made the change, and it was cool that they made the change, and it was a cool story, and it was great. It just doesn't fit in the context of the show, because the rest of the show is entirely about Joel and Ellie and all their relationships with other people. And they still could have had that dynamic like they did in the game with Bill, where they're exploring what happens to his partner and all of that. So I don't think it was a bad episode. People are saying it's the best episode of TV, and I just have to question, like, what classifies the best episode? Is it the best one-off story? Because sure, that's true. But if you're talking about, but when you're saying episode specifically, I almost feel like that also includes within the context of the show, in which case I don't think it fits.
That's fair. No, I agree with that. Yeah.
It was very controversial on TikTok, so I wanted to bring it up again, get your thoughts on it.
I definitely wouldn't.
People hated me for saying that it was not my favorite episode.
Well, here's the thing, and obviously in saying that, people are gonna probably throw.
Honestly, people didn't. I was shocked.
Okay.
I was being very careful, like, to make sure, hey, I'm not talking about any of the social, political aspects of the show. I'm solely talking about where this story fits amongst the greater narrative.
Wow, I'm really kind of surprised that many people fought back.
I was actually kind of happy with the internet for once, because they didn't just make
spin that onto whatever. Okay, that's what I was worried about with this episode. But no, I completely agree with that. I just it was honestly a great watch from beginning to end. But just compared to the other 8 episodes we got, and with it interacting and not really interacting with the actual storyline or what we needed for the story, if we never got that episode, the whole show from beginning to end would have been totally fine. I honestly feel like,
Mm-hmm.
even if they like stumbled upon that town, or like
I mean, yeah, they have to get the truck somehow,
right.
But other than
Even
that,
if they stumbled upon that or something, or like he's like, oh, I know where a friend like used to live or something, and they had the note, or there was a picture of Bill and Frank, like something that like an Easter egg, honestly, more or less, would have probably just fit better story wise from start to finish. Like I said, still loved the episode.
or
but,
I mean, we were talking about not having infected earlier. I thought that was that section of the game is really great finale to the infected being the biggest threat, because you're also introduced to Bill, who's terrified of you, and you know that you're fine, but like that introduces the idea of people are more threatening than infected. And so for you, the infected are the biggest threat at the time, but people, you're also realizing, oh, like people don't trust people. There's this other element to it. And so as you progress, infected become less of an issue, and the people become more of a primary threat.
that is something that I've always had in my own thoughts. Like, if the world went to shit, like say this happens today, tomorrow, like I get people can be greedy and people can get rough, but like that's not really gonna, I mean, maybe because we see it so much in these shows, like Walking Dead, you know, any apocalyptic setting, like the people are almost more of a threat every time than the actual threat at hand. No chance people act like that though. I mean, maybe they do, but like,
I think you should turn the news on every once in a
well,
while.
I mean, yeah, no. I mean, I get it. I just like think to myself, like, how realistic is that? And like, a part of me is hoping it never would be.
I mean, I would hope it's not,
now
but
I'm afraid.
I know that it is extremely realistic.
Yeah. Honestly, a part of me, if I turned on the news and listened as much as I probably should, I would be a Bill. I would be a Bill. Dude, give me my gun collection. Give me my nice little radios. I'll just hide downstairs.
I mean,
He had a dope little setup. He had the multi-screen setup, all the alarms. Man, homie was living large down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was living life. Last thing that I want to talk about that I thought was really interesting, and it was another interesting balance you had to find, was player versus the viewer. Because when you're consuming this story, you can consume it in two different ways.
Right.
And adapting a video game is something that you have to take very carefully. We kind of talked about this a second ago.
Yeah.
But that last episode in particular, I think the reason it wasn't as impactful as it was in the game was because I was consuming it as a viewer and not a player. And I'm curious, like, was Joel's rampage and making the decision to take Ellie, even though he knows that that isn't what she would have wanted, was that like an emotional moment for you? Like, did you have any reaction to that, or was it just...
So yeah, a part of me really thought, and I'm kind of glad I actually did. I watched this at last episode with my wife, so she's sitting right next to me and going through the whole thing, every kill, every rampage, every shock little twist when he shoots, what's her name right there in the parking garage and takes the truck. Like when all that goes on, every single kill, she's like, I forgive him. I forgive him. I mean, it's Pedro. I forgive him. Like he's good. It's Joel. It's worth it. Like he's justified. And like a part of me is like the same way. I do kind of feel that way because like, especially after they both like opened up to each other and he like talked about Sarah and like how much they would have liked each other and how much like they're not that similar, but they are kind of similar ways, and how he, you know, he was the one that shot himself and he missed, and you know, she's like, I'm glad you didn't. Like after that all happens, I'm just like, yeah, he's not going to give that up. Like it's definitely has its selfish take to it, but also, I mean, I don't know.
And that's the Breaking Bad effect right there. Like Breaking Bad, you have Walter White, who is destroying his family, murdering anyone who gets in his way so he can cook crystal meth. Yet at the end, you're still hoping that he gets away with it. Like, he's a terrible person all the way around, but you are still rooting for him all the way through. And yeah, like one of the things that they did with the show and the editing, one of the big points of it was instead of a focus on violence, they wanted to focus on emotion. So if you watch it, before just about any gunshot throughout the entire 9 episodes, it cuts away before the gun actually shoots, and it cuts to something else, so that the focus is never reaction, or the focus is never on the violence. It is almost always on the emotion of what's going on. And that was really interesting because when you're playing the game, obviously that last rampage through the hospital is not slow and cinematic. It is.
So you're the one shooting.
It is you know it's the last mission. You have very limited ammo left. You're just going off. You're trying to stop all these people so you can get to Ellie. And so it's this really big, like you're just full of adrenaline as you're going through it.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the end, it's not a cutscene where you shoot the doctor and you pull Ellie off. You are still in the game, and you have to physically kill the doctor, and you have to physically go over and unhook all of Ellie's stuff. And that right there puts the weight, even thinking about it, I'm getting like emotional because that right there puts the weight of that decision on you, because you're like, yeah, like I need to save Ellie. I know how important she is, but also you have the knowledge of this isn't what she wants.
Yeah.
And this is condemning the world to live with this infected problem for the rest of their lives. But also like, you know, still like it creates this really crazy mental thing in you where you're like, I have to do this because you're the player. And so it was interesting how they didn't quite get to that point. Like I watched it and I was completely fine. I think because I was expecting to feel differently and I just wasn't. So the show didn't quite push me to that point, but I appreciated the attempt at every single gunshot. Like they didn't really show the gunshots that Joel was doing. It was all on his face or on his feet or on just bodies piled up on the ground as he's shooting. And so I like how they were able to build that emotion of the moment, and it wasn't focused on the violence, because in the game that whole part is just full on. Right. I'm going to throw Molotov cocktails and bombs, and I'm going to blow your face off with a shotgun. Like all of that stuff. And I mean, even references in that of like lots of being like behind, like almost a third person shot. Yeah. There's even a moment where someone like puts the gun down. It's like, please don't do it. And Joel kills them.
Still does.
That if you like hit someone's kneecap in the game, they'll be like, all right, I surrender. And like, it's like a quick time thing, like where it'll stop and you just kind of walk up to them. And then it says hit square, and you hit square, and then you just bash their face in. Like it's the player versus the viewer aspect I thought was really interesting throughout the game. Yeah. How they found balances between it. And how even though some of those heavier decisions aren't as impactful as a viewer, that's what makes the game worth playing. Yeah. But also you don't get the same emotion in the game in a lot of smaller scenes and things like that. And that's what makes the show worth watching as well as playing the game. Yeah. And I think that's what makes this such a great adaptation is it stands alone, but also I think it works really well in conjunction with each other.
Yeah. Dude, that's crazy. Yeah. Which I kind of noticed on a lot of that for not being as violent. Like it had some things that like I almost skipped through because like it's just gruesome. But like now that I'm thinking, now you mentioned that, like, yeah, it doesn't show. Like the one I immediately jumped to is when Ellie's on top of the preacher guy with the cleaver just going straight through his. Obviously, I'm assuming it's his head or just his chest or something. But I
think it was everything.
Everything. He's gone. He is gone. He's in several pieces. We don't see a single thing of that. You know?
Yeah, we just see Bella Ramsey giving an Emmy-worthy performance.
Gosh, she was amazing. Yeah, and so I'm just like watching through that, which having more of a heavier take for emotion, I think is honestly a big thing of why it like was able to veer me off of the idea that this was more horror related, as there wasn't as many jump scares, or if there were, like it's okay, we got something kind of sweet, you know, beforehand. We got something little that tied into more. You know, the emotional aspect of the show was huge, and they did it really well. So. No, I like the game difference though.
Yes,
that's definitely interesting from a player perspective versus just a viewer.
It makes both of them worth it, but also like the show did a good job at trying to emulate the same emotions without having that same kind of that feeling. So yeah, those are a lot of my thoughts on Last of Us. Believe me, I have so many more, but we've been talking forever. Graham, do you have any final thoughts on The Last of Us and things that make this such a great adaptation?
As a whole, yeah, fantastic show overall. I think everyone should give it a chance and watch it if you have not already, among the 4.7, 22 million other people that have watched the show, plus millions more. Probably.
Yeah, that's just the first episode.
That's just first episodes, yeah. I'm looking through that. So those are already crazy numbers. But yeah, if you haven't seen the show, definitely give it a chance. Obviously, listen to what we had to say first. If you really are on your feet about it, you're not sure what to do, feel free to take our opinions into thought and then run from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I've said enough about The Last of Us. I love this show so much. I'll be watching it over and over and over again, and I can't wait to play the game for the second time in like a 2-month period. You've been listening to The Popcorn Hangover. I'm Alex. That is Graham. We've been discussing HBO's The Last of Us. What were your thoughts on The Last of Us? Let us know on all the things, Instagram, TikTok, patreon.com/thepopcornhangover. Next week, if you want to Google if you don't know what a song is, you want to like look it up, this may or may not help you. that's my really bad.
No, that's okay. Yep.
That's what we're gonna go with. So can't wait to talk to you next week. And that's all I got for you.
Peace.